jointly organized by IEEE Kerala Section, the Institute of Engineers Kerala State Center, Computer Society of India Trivandrum Chapter, Project Management Institute Kerala Chapter, Internet Society Trivandrum Chapter, Wakam Maulavi Foundation Trust Trivandrum, Life Member Affinity Group IEEE Kerala Section, IEEE Engineering in Medicine and Biology Society Kerala Chapter, and Institute of Electronics and Telecommunication Engineering. Today, on this 90th talk, we are extremely delighted to have with us Professor V.K. Damodaran sir, Fellow IE India Life Senior Member IEEE, Chairman of Foundation for Advanced Clean Energy Studies, Chairman of Center for Environment and Development, Chairman of Nature's Green Guardians Foundation, Chairman of Chakshumadi, that is the Empowerment and Assistive Technology Center for the Blind, and the President of Wakam Maulavi Foundation Trust, VMFT, sharing his aspects of life beyond 2022, adapting technologies for living with uncertainties. As usual, before we begin, participants are requested to kindly put their names to login, which you have used while registering. Also, I would like to bring your attention to the feedback form provided during the session, and kindly let us know your opinion, and please don't hesitate to mention if there is any requirement for the certificate of attendance. You can mark up your queries regarding the session in the chat box, which I'll read out at the end of the session. Once again, hearty welcome to this 90th talk of Indus Society weekly webinar series, IWWS. Now, moving on to the session formally, I invite Amina, IEEE EMDS volunteer, to welcome the virtual gathering.
Am I audible?
Yes, Amina, you are audible.
A warm good evening to one and all. It is my pleasure and privilege to welcome you all today on this auspicious evening where we have our 90th talk of the Indus Society weekly webinar series. This great venture initiated by Indus Society has been successfully coordinated throughout the past 89 talks and is going great with illustrious speakers and enthusiastic participants. Today's talk is not an exception. First and foremost, I welcome the respected guest of honor and speaker for the day, Professor V.K. Damodaran sir, IEEE Life Senior Member. Now, our ever-supporting pillar and backbone, Mr. A.G. Harindralal sir, Chairman of Inter-Society Activities Committee Kerala Section. I welcome you, sir. Gratifying my welcome to IEEE volunteers and coordinators of today's session. Wholehearted welcome to all of you. Last, but the prominent of all the organizing societies, professionals, dignitaries, and delegates who joined with us today. Words are in short of the tremendous support you have shown us for the past 89 talk series. The pleasure is all mine to welcome you all today on this 90th Inter Society weekly webinar series. I know you all are eager to get insights from our honored guest. I'm sure the session will be informative and a great time to be remembered. Cordial welcome to one and all once again.
Thank you, Amina. Now I invite Naureen to introduce our speaker.
Very warm good evening, one and all who have gathered here. Today, we have with us our Honorable Speaker, Mr. V.K. Damodaran sir, to deliver a keynote on the topic Life Beyond 2022, Adapting Technologies for Living with Uncertainties. Our esteemed speaker is a Life Senior Member of IEEE, Fellow of IE, and Honorable Fellow of SCEM, Faculty at College of Engineering, Guindy, and at Regional Engineering College, Calicut. He also coordinated multidisciplinary, multi-institutional feasibility survey on the potential of micro and mini hydropower in Kerala for the Ministry of Environment and Forest Government of India. He served internationally as Managing Director of the UNIDO and UNDP sponsored International Network on Small Hydropower, Hangzhou, China, and nationally as a member of Inter-Ministerial Advisory Committee on Technology Transfer, constituted by Ministry of S&T. He had received the most prestigious Management Leadership Award and Gold Medal, IEEE Third Millennial Medal, 2012 Art and Historical Achievement Award for Innovations in Hybrid RE Systems for Rural Energization in Africa and Asia. 2014 EAB Meritorious Achievement Award for Evolving Technological Teacher Training Modules and PS Outstanding Engineer Award, and a prolific science writer, editor, author, 50 years of air broadcast, 30 years on TV, UN consultant. Thank you.
Thank you, Nauri. So the wait is over. Now let's all synchronize our attention towards the esteemed speaker, Professor V.K. Damodaran. Sir, the platform is all yours.
Okay, thank you very much, and welcome all participants to this session. May I request Engineer Harindralal to manage the screen movement.
Well, you can share. Now you can share, sir.
Okay, let me try.
Yeah, that's right.
Now I go to projection mode. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, yeah. So the topic today is a little strange. I'm talking about life beyond 2022 when we are about to step in to 2022. But as you find, my focus is on adapting technologies for living with uncertainties. The presumption is that we are going to have a life of uncertainties with heightened strength, not that we never had life with uncertainties, but in future, we are going to have heightened sense, or rather events of uncertainties. And if we have to actually live a comfortable life without affecting the progress and prosperity, we will have to actually think of adapting the available technologies, the technologies that have been already developed now to meet the situations that might come unexpected. That is the theme. So for the first thing I want to say is uncertainty is not a new thing. With COVID pandemic, we fully understand what uncertainty is. But if you look at studies by various agencies who have actually developed what is called as the Global Uncertainty Index, this is actually the graph for the past 30 years. You find that from 1990 Q1 to 2020 Q1, you find 30 years, the uncertainty part has been gradually increasing, and with 2020 first quarter, it has actually touched a level which is unparalleled in history, at least for a century back. So with this scenario, let us actually look at how we should perceive uncertainty and look at adapting technologies. So when I'm talking about life beyond 2022, I should also say something about life in 2020 and 2021. Here I will be using, and you will also be tempted to use, these three words, BC, DC, and AC. DC and AC are well known to engineers and especially electrical engineers. And BC and AD were known to people for counting of years. But here the BC, DC, and AC are before, during, and after COVID-19. Uncertainty has always been a part of life and it cannot be avoided. Definitely not avoided in future. Uncertainty, we always consider it as something too bad and something which we wouldn't want, but not all of uncertainties are bad. Why I say so is, if you have an uncertain future, or you are very uncertain about what the outcome of an event is, when that event gives you a positive outcome or a positive output, you feel immensely joyous. It will be very exciting when one of our rockets, our VSSC, is actually trying to launch or just actually launched. And when it successfully goes into orbit, what is actually the amount of happiness that every citizen gets? Think about those engineers who have actually crafted it and sent it. Their excitement is almost limitless. So that is where sometimes uncertainty is a pleasurable thing as well. But we have to keep it to a limit. So about the last 3 decades, I just mentioned that on climate, on politics, and on technology, last 3 decades have been having many events and many records of uncertainty, eminently uncertain. The last decade, the last one, that is the one just behind, has been driving uncertainty still harder. That is where we actually started thinking very seriously about that one. And we had actually 2 enemies in front. One is the climate change. One recently, for the last 2 years, is the COVID-19 pandemic. So if you want to classify uncertainty as philosophers classified, there are 3 classifications. One is actually known knowns. The other one is known unknowns. That is, we know that it is really unknown, and that way we consider it as an uncertainty, but we know that that is going to come. Then the third category is unknown unknowns. We know that something unknown is going to come. That feeling is not there because it suddenly takes us by surprise. In fact, COVID-19 falls in that category. We never knew that such a situation will come. Even after it has come, we never knew that it will get spread at least for 2 years. And we were almost ready to launch our normal life step by step. But then you have the Omicron variant coming, and uncertainty still looms large. So due to COVID-19, uncertainty rose very high during the Q1 of 2020. That is the highest during the past 30 years. But can technology help in solving this problem, or at least alleviating the disadvantages that we have for a normal, smooth sailing of our careers as well as our life? That is the question. And unequivocally, not only technologists and scientists, philosophers, politicians, and everybody expect and believe that technology can help. How? We will actually examine. So uncertainty demands innovations, and the degree of uncertainty, as we have actually classified there, we will find that what we need is faster innovations. So how we can actually do rapid innovations during uncertainty crisis? So for example, the last 2 years itself, if you take, there are, I'll just have taken 7 very touching things which we have actually all felt. For example, many passenger flights which could not actually fly because of this high infection rate, those planes did not actually remain idle. Of course, many remained idle, but most of them, they were used for the freight traffic, because freight through the sea was also affected. And we wanted medicines and so many other accessories to prevent or manage or control this disease. So we wanted higher and faster air traffic. And so this was actually, they were used as freight traffic. Movies which could not be released because theaters remained shut, they went on direct streaming, that is online. You can actually enjoy these things. Then retailers and pharmacies always wanted us to go show up the prescription and or your list of things that you want and get your things. But now you find that home delivery is very common. All that we have to do is give a WhatsApp message. Then mobile automation, this is actually a particular incident where somebody wanted to establish a mobile automobile servicing and cleaning service to actually move to places where the service is required. So it was started as a startup, and he had actually planned for a 2-year time for establishing it or getting it into online. But because of the pandemic situation, he could actually establish and run it fully within 2 weeks. So you find there are certain positive edges as well. Retailer stores serving as pickup points. That is, in many places, for example, many hotels and restaurants, even here in Kerala and India, they allowed only pickup service. That is, you order your food and take it only as a parcel. Don't sit there and eat. So this was also an innovation that was actually done, quickly done. And hotel chains were allowing rooms because people were not traveling and they were not getting places to work. So what they did is, nearby offices, they couldn't put all the offices within the same space. So some people were actually asked to work remote. So many hotel rooms were actually converted as the remote working space. So that way they also made little money. So this is actually because of the distancing that was required by this. And many government civilian services were channeled to the public through online services, that we know that many of time are paying taxes or this or that, many other things, getting some certificates. All these things are now available as online service. So these are all some of the rapid innovations that has actually come during uncertainty crisis. And I mentioned about of the three, climate change was another thing just before the pandemic, and how that uncertainty goes and how the technological community looked at it. For that, I will actually take a quotation from Lovelock, which was actually given not during the pandemic period, much before that, on climate change. Lovelock, 2009. It is actually quoted by Leslie Paul, TLA, in an article. And I found it very interesting. The comparison showed that only just to feel that how we are going to tackle this issue. What it says is, do not expect the climate to follow the smooth path of slowly but sedatively rising temperatures. The real Earth changes by fits and starts with spells of constancy, even slight decline between the jumps to greater heat. Climate change is not at all like the smooth civil engineering of a major highway that climbs uninterruptedly up a mountain pass, but more like the mountain itself, a concatenation of slopes, valleys, flat meadows, rock steps, and precipices. So this is actually the mathematical model or picture of the uncertainty, very beautifully put as like the mountain itself, a concatenation of slopes, valleys, flat meadows, rock steps, and precipices. So with that in our mind, let us look at the other things. But uncertainties and political responses. In all these uncertainties, especially of a very quick nature, you find that political response is the one which is very determining. So let us see how that goes. Uncertainty results from the fact that events in the future do not follow the course of the past events. That is probably the best definition of uncertainty. And it simply means that knowledge of the future, that is what is going to come, is always incomplete. We do not have a complete knowledge of what is going to happen in the immediate future. So this also, a lot of studies have actually done in the past on uncertainties of different kinds, the ones which are introduced by technology itself. And they have actually divided this at least into 8 categories. One is actually technological uncertainty. Other one is market uncertainty, the regulatory or the institutional uncertainty, social or political uncertainty, acceptance or legitimacy uncertainty, managerial uncertainty, then timing uncertainty, and consequence uncertainty. So we know that it's uncertain, but what is most uncertain is what consequence this is going to give. So for this, there is an example also, very well noted example, that is during the Cold War period, that is between the US and Russia. That was a time when Sputnik was launched in 1957. The immediate political response of US at that time was, they were actually apprehending that the Soviet rocket, the Sputnik that has gone, that is going to attack the US telephone and communication network to disable the US communication. So US DARPA, which is actually the Defense Advanced Research Mechanism, which does very strategic research, funded to various universities even, but this is always done in a very secret way. And MIT professor J.C.R. Licklider, they actually developed a solution for that. And that was actually packet switching in the communication was actually brought in as a solution to kind of defend or keep the US communication system safe against the perceived threat of Sputnik launching. Another was actually because of the same thing, then US president actually ordered an inquiry on education system in USA. They couldn't actually believe that Russia could, no, at that time, not Russia, Soviet Union. Soviet Union could actually launch such a thing. They were thinking that technologically, Soviet Union is actually far behind. So this high-level commission went round and they actually brought out a number of findings. And one of the findings that that was brought, because this was actually, I myself quoted this sometime in 80s and 90s in some of my papers and lectures, that the one thing was that what they found out was that the mathematics and science content of higher school education, that is at the towards the end of the school education, was actually at least 25% less than the content and the rigor that Soviet Union had actually framed. And a number of years of that kind of education helped them to get people who could do research on these things and come out with a satellite launching earlier than the targeted date of US. So these are actually some of the political responses for uncertainties. So when COVID pandemic induced lockdown came, number of solutions were tried by several countries, including India, and within India, including Kerala had a slightly different approach. Some other states had a still different approach. And but if you see all these things, whatever people have been, how people have actually taken these things, there are 5 or 6 things which actually showed some kind of that public preference. Was the most important thing was that localism. That is, you wanted to have a localized solution. You did not want to depend upon foreign countries or distant places. Second thing was actually a preference for lesser of travel. Third thing was you think in terms of local consumption. Anything consumed, food, vegetables, and all other consumer materials, you locally produce and consume locally. That was the kind of localization from the high trend of globalization that was flying in the air. We came suddenly to this one. Fourth one was actually, we started learning for reducing waste, less waste. And also self-sufficiency was actually considered a very important aspect. And finally, stronger environmental awareness. So some of these are actually really good. And we can also say that all the 6 are really good, but some of the things we will not be able to practice post-COVID or post-uncertainty. So organizations and consumers actually remain connected. That was one good thing. You found out that even though not physically connected, organizations and consumers were actually connected either through communication, through phones, or through various other means. This connection was never lost. Reduced dependency on global economy, because many a time you found out that when a small industry here, they will be depending upon 3% of their components, which is actually imported from China because it is very cheap and it may be a critical chip or some other component. But because there is a lack of trust, some of the materials coming, the supply chains were actually interrupted, and therefore we were not able. So this was actually an opportunity for us to adjust, and that is your dependence on global economy was actually suddenly and gradually reduced, and local sourcing was actually thought of as a better solution. Higher priority for climate change resilience and CSR than economic growth. So corporate social responsibility was actually considered very important during this time, rather than a higher assumed percentage of economic growth that we wanted, like 6%, 8%, whatever it is. Then high concern for information privacy was actually considered, and it was actually very concerned. Even Zoom was actually at one time said that don't use it because privacy issues are there. And creation of employment opportunities, and focus on local development and attention to innovative imports. So imports also, a little innovative approach had to be done. So if you see, this scenario can be, now this has been, several countries have actually done, because I have been examining various literature on how countries have actually done. And one example I thought I should actually present, because ultimately what I want is our engineers and our scientists should think on ourselves and develop a technology strategy for facing the uncertainties that are likely to come and the impacts that already we are suffering. So for this, one example I am taking from Sweden. They started what is called as a region villages concept to avoid, that is actually the localism that we have said. It's actually highly localized approach. They set up a number of villages called region villages. That is roughly its area is 250,000 meters squared, or roughly 60 to 63 acres of land. That will be a small village, a region village. And out of it, 25% area was actually set apart for buildings of all kinds, residential, commercial, everything. And with around 250 to 300 housing units, at least there maybe 300 to 500 families will be living. The rest was farming, food production, energy production, and water management. This was how those villages were actually organized. So you will find a diagrammatic picture of this region village, where you find water management setup is one side, renewable energy generation and distribution on the other side, waste management mechanisms are on other side, and local food production on the other side. Then you have actually institutions, buildings, schools, so many other things are there. The whole things are well connected with proper linkages already planned and done. And that again, they did it actually with a very White Architecture is a company of 70 years old company, which has been in architectural consultancy and doing a lot of things all over the world. And they were a partner to this region villages AB Sweden, that is something like what you call subsidiary of the Holland-based company Region Villages Holding, founded by James Ulrich, a senior technologist, analyst, and entrepreneur at Stanford University. He was sitting there directing these things, planning for Sweden, with a background in computer gaming. In fact, he is actually a computer gaming expert, and he used the principles of computer gaming in deciding the elements and the linkages of this village design. That is very interesting, and we should also see that in our technology, there are various groups and things for which the use in future is still not very certain for us. So you will find that many of such things can be adapted to solving problems for us locally. That is why I have actually definitely chosen this. And fully circular, self-sufficient and resilient communities were built up and tried now for a number of years. Then doorstep high-yield organic food production, locally produced and stored energy, comprehensive recycling, and climate-positive building, all with the village communities' participation. That is one of the things. And the 5 principles they depended upon that was ecological food production, including farm to table, vertical farming, and aquaponics. In fact, aquaponics and vertical farming was actually done and practiced in various parts, but the combination of all these things in a limited area, localized area, is actually one of the good things that I have actually seen about that. Mixed renewable energy and storage, water and waste recycling, energy positive homes, and empowerment of local communities. These were the basic basis on which they actually set up this one. And this is actually a view of that village, only the one part where you will find that people are involved in various activities. You find those buildings, they are not actually something like back to nature kind of buildings, but they are actually modern buildings suitable for that kind of a climate. And many people are involved in different kinds of waste management and other activities there. So it is actually a very quiet and simple one. And so where are we now? That is the next question. I would say we are in transit from 2021 to 2022 and beyond. So climate change, automation, and pandemic have forced disruptions to our life. 3, as I have mentioned in the beginning, climate change, automation. Automation has also got a big role in these disruptions. And pandemic, of course, it made it totally crumbled and threw it right in front of our lap. So life, livelihood, education, and food will never be as before in 2020 and beyond. So that is the premise on which I have actually selected this topic for our discussion today, that life beyond 2022, livelihood, that is our job, careers, or the labor, work, all those things, plus education. It may not be the fully institutionally based or centered education that we will have. This will undergo terrific transformation. And food system also, we will find that climate change will adversely affect the food production, agricultural yield will come down, then there will be prices of food will go up, that will create economic complications. So with all these things, these 4 areas will definitely get reshaped and reformed from 2022 onwards, or at least beyond 2022. According to a study by Coursera, which is a MOOC platform, which is all over the world, several millions of students are studying several courses with them, and the World Economic Forum, they did a study to predict certain things. And by 2025, they say that 69 million jobs will get displaced. And 40% of the core skills of workers will definitely change. At least 40% of the core skills will get changed. That means you need retraining and also sometimes replacing. But the good part of that one is the same study says that by 2025, 149 million new technology-based jobs will be available. So even if you lose 69, you are going to get 149. But there is a little problem. The same people who did these 69 million jobs, they will have to be either retrained or some will have to be eliminated from the scene and given some other occupation. Otherwise, they may not be directly replaceable into this 149 million. Maybe some, but not all. That is the scenario. Digital upskilling, remote working facilities, human skills development. That's again, human skill development also will be required. So is the world that is going to be a topsy-turvy, upside down thing? Are the current education, so the questions that we have to ask if you really want to involve in solving this is, are the current education infrastructures adequate enough for learning in the future? We can debate. I'm not saying that no or yes. Are our workplaces, work protocols, and on-job trainings fit enough to resume work? Here again, you will find in your own way, in your own area, you will find a lot of misfits. Let us collect all those things. Are graduates confident of facing the challenges of career life? That is, when they are appointed for a job, do they have the confidence of completely and satisfactorily completing those jobs? And so what is actually the pandemic's impact on job skills? Three points I would like to highlight here. There may be many. Increased drive towards empathetic workplaces. That means the workplaces, you will find that workers will have a number of mental problems. Their mental health will be slightly declined. And the study says that 2 out of 5 workers, that means around 40% of workers will actually suffer mental problems. Students also will, if you study that, there are also higher percentages there. So this is during the pandemic period, at least this has been the scenario. Second one is remote and hybrid work is increasing. In United States, 53% is the remote working share that has actually gone. In UK, it has been 52%. In China, surprisingly, it has only been 28%. We have to actually find out why and how. Third one is developing skills in any form of artificial intelligence. That is, any skill that artificial intelligence cannot actually replace. There are a number of skills. Such skills will have to be developed, as it is going to be very important in the immediate future. So is this actually a possible thing? Is any other country looking at things this way? I take an example from Morocco. We don't normally look at African countries, but Morocco in the North Africa, they did an experiment. Morocco's Ministry of National Education and Vocational Training has recently initiated a scheme for improving student employability by switching public higher education institutions to a 4-year bachelor system. That is something like a bachelor course degree they will get, 4-year study. And this curriculum has its focus in the first year on languages and human skills. And what are those things, languages and human skills? Like teamwork, time management, and problem solving. It's not only languages alone and just human communication alone, but their teamwork, ability to work in teams, time management, and problem solving. This is what Morocco has actually experimented, and they are actually trying to expand it in a big way. In fact, Morocco, 10 years back, there was an experiment to create agriculture in desert by desalinating water using solar power only. Solar power means not electricity, but direct sunlight using solar hot water thing. That was actually done by a UK engineer called Patton. And he did it successfully. The cost was very small, and they created something like this, what you call the greenhouse sheds kind of thing, plastic roof things. Within that, a lot of agriculture could be done. Anything, vegetables, seeds, everything could be done. So we need challenges need innovative solutions. So the whole thing what says is, wherever something has been done, we also will have to do something. And as I earlier mentioned, there are the 4 areas, life challenges. I don't want to list everything. By now, you yourself will be thinking about what kind of changes are required. For example, in life challenges, numerous deaths have actually happened. We have to prevent that. Health setbacks have been there. So we will have to like vaccination, and like now, even for COVID, we have invented some tablets. And so all these kinds of things have to be kind of a new innovation thing, and the collective science and technology thinking will have to be there. and distancing is going to be a normal in the coming days, and how to distance and how much to distance, and all those things will have to be decided. So there are many such angles to it. Similarly, livelihood challenges, loss of livelihood. Many people have actually lost jobs. Actually, the casual workers, I think all over the world, 33 to 40% people have actually totally been deprived of their jobs, and they are in dire straits. And only where something like our Kerala kit or something, even though we may laugh at it, that's actually the right time. That kind of support were not there, the fatalities would have been much more. So this all over the world, this has actually happened. And so loss of livelihood means, that is, livelihood means your job, how you were actually earning by daily work, working on the soil, working in the water, or working in highways, or working in shops, or carrying loads, or anything. And loss of income for them, need to modify work environments, then remote work, how you can actually organize remote work for in different things. We are, even though in IT and all, we are actually doing it in a big way now, but in many other areas, remote work will have to be started. But how and to what extent has to be decided. This is where we will have to put our head into. Disruptions to teamwork. So teamwork has been disrupted due to the requirement of distancing, and also our mask and all that kind of thing. So how we can actually restart and bring it to a moderate and obeyable system. So challenges in the education, as I have said, schools will not be the old schools. Colleges and university education will not be the old kind of teacher-centric education, classroom-centric will not be there. It will be there for some part, but major part of it is going to be something different. What that something should be, every country can actually think in terms of their environments. They can actually design what is required. Food challenges, as I mentioned earlier, there is going to be water shortage. There is going to be, therefore, certain items of food will be very costly. And so we will have to actually deviate from that kind of high water needed. Agriculture will change, and some other new varieties will have to come. And so a lot of changes there, it will actually happen. And just to show that 220 to 225, the present prediction, because of study of 20 and 21, what has actually the FAO and other organizations have come now is the food insecurity at 2020 was 135 million were highly insecure as far as food availability is concerned. But by 2025, even with the present all protection, it is going to rise to 265 million, almost double. So this is going to be the scenario. So we will have to find solutions. So I come to the point and then leave with the rest of things for your discussion. So my question is, are we prepared to reimagine our work, our education, our life, our food, and so many other things? And it is not only enough if we reimagine the new system and the new setup, but we have to retool our strategies as well as the real tools that we use. And we have to actually restructure organizations, events, even research and education. Are we prepared for that? We have to sometimes restore some of those things which have actually withstood the uncertainty that was there for eons. And we all say we have to rebuild. Are we ready for it? And why all these? Reimagine, retool, restructure, restore, and rebuild, only to re-establish our life, an easy life, comfortable life, and progressive and prosperous life. So the question is, are we prepared for it? And how we are going to start number of rapid innovations that has actually been done in several countries. Of course, there are many examples, because this being a small topic and I am speaking to people who are highly ingenious and probably more knowledgeable than me All that I wanted was to attract your attention on this urgent issue, without which we are not going to make a smooth and fast rebuilding or re-establishing our lives in our country. And as the example I have said, that was actually a localized version. There are other models also have been developed where the remote working is much less, and you will actually depend more on certain other things. So there are almost 4 models of different variation in some of these elements. But I feel that the localized version will have the better confidence of the people, general public, and therefore that is going to be the mainstay in most of the countries. And with that, I close my presentation, and thank you very much for your patient listening. I'll be very much happy to listen to some of the clarifications, additions, or any kind of criticisms that you feel were my visualization of these things. Because none of these things were invented by me. Everything has been taken from the observations of many people. Only thing is I just gathered together and put it into a small net of 13 or 14 slides. That's all. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. That was really wonderful session, and it was great listening to you. Sir, we have received some queries regarding the session. Others can post their queries in the chat box, and it will be very kind of you, sir, if you respond to those doubts. Shall I read it out for you?
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Okay. First question is from Ravindranathan M. And the question is, COVID-19 period is a problem period for some, but an opportunity for others. Did you agree with this?
Definitely. Every uncertainty or every kind of this disruption is definitely, it is an opportunity. And the what I should say, ingenuity of human beings is actually to turn adversities into opportunities. And therefore, that is exactly why I am pointing out some of these things, that this is an opportunity for us to travel in some of these directions or even some new directions and bring out solace to our people. Definitely great about that. Thank you, sir.
Okay, sir. And next question is also from Ravindranathan M. And the question is, there is one view in social media that COVID-19 is a man-made issue in China. Nature is finding a solution to this created issue by mankind and is succeeding too. If so, nature is really great. What is your opinion?
I don't think it's so. Because there is no logic in it. I don't think it's this kind of a biological warfare. No country can actually try to intentionally do that. If it is by a slip or a mistake, if somebody says that. So this is only, I would say politically, of course, it is not technologically, as politically, there has been saying that a lot of economic leadership of the whole world, it is going to shift from US to China in another 10 or 15 years. That was it. Some people used to say that it will be in 5 or 8 years. In fact, I had been actually living in China for 5 years and traveling almost throughout the Chinese continent, all to the north, west, east, and south, everything. And also 28 years, I have been constantly interacting with China. Ever since in 1992, I visited China as a UN fellow. There, I have been observing how the systems work there and all that kind of thing. And I don't think this is only an argument for us to waste time in finding proper innovations or solutions to this issue. Even if it were so, what is the purpose in discussing that and doing? What we should actually do is how to somehow see that the problem is actually solved. Instead of that, we are always discussing that China is at fault, don't buy things from China. And none of those things work also. That is also what we have seen. Wherever sanctions have been introduced, wherever certain material purchase has been stopped, those countries who have actually stopped have actually affected, it has affected, because that is actually a basic economic theory that I don't know why people are doing this, because little to my knowledge, I feel that it is actually a thing that discussion is completely out of place. First of all, it has no basis, scientific basis, because, but even if it has a scientific basis, that this is not the thing that we should do now. We should actually think of many such uncertainties. Now Omicron has come. It has not, nobody says that it has come from there. Just because it has come from South America, we don't actually, South Africa, we don't actually blame them. So, and Delta, that also did not come from China. So these are all somehow, if you are logically thinking, we need not actually worry about all those things. What we are as engineers, professionals and scientists, our job is to find out how to safeguard people's lives and livelihoods from these things, and also make adjustments to our systems so that we can actually go on smoothly. Maybe 1 or 2 years will be lost in the process, but later you can even take up that thing, because when this first SARS came, I was actually living with my family in China at that time. I have seen how they have actually managed it. Even here, see, they completely cordoned off. In my city also, there were 3 cases when SARS came. So immediately they cordoned all those buildings in that area, and the food was actually brought from outside, and every family was their doorstep where the military people, they will go and keep the food there. And similarly, all the requirements are met by those people, but nobody was allowed to go out or anybody else was gone. So within weeks, they could actually control the whole thing. So like that, we don't actually approach all those kinds of simple approaches. Then why should we unnecessarily go on doing this blame game, which does not bring anything? That is my feeling. Anyway, other questions, please.
Okay, the next question is, how to sustain the environmental benefits we derived during the initial period of COVID-19?
Oh, that's whoever has asked this question. The environmental benefits that we had at that time, it was not a benefit at all. Because certain activities were stalled, the factors, because in many other countries, actually during the last year, you have found out that some of those pollution and air pollution and all those things are coming up. But you should actually think in terms of technologies by which you are able to suck out those pollutions. Actually, the carbon upload also will have to be removed. We should actually working on those technologies. Because China, they have actually done in Beijing and some other cities, they have actually installed now the sucking of this pollution and cleaning and things like that. And similarly, a lot of other things are now happening. And also in the energy, fusion is almost going to be a reality, a workable reality and economical reality. And so such technologies are also coming. So if you actually survey the whole scientific scenario, that relief is actually nothing. That is what we could have expected, and that has actually happened. Definitely, when we are back to normal work, this will come. But one thing is that during this period, there has been an awareness on, as I have said, of the 5-6 points I said, one is actually increased environmental awareness. That has actually started looking at every country and every state, as well as every institution has now started looking at improving their environment, making them more greener than what they were earlier. And also this green philosophy has moved into green economics and green engineering and so many other things. So that kind of a green philosophy pervading, as well as developing newer technologies and utilizing some of the issues. Because recently I had been actually asked by a company which wanted to do one of our district hospitals sewerage. They wanted to have a cleaning system. So a consultant, chemical engineering consultant, has given a wonderful design and all that thing. We found out that the technology is perfectly fine what they have used. But what we could suggest was, I also felt that if you can actually add a small UV radiation also to the clean water before it is being let out, that will be 100% sure, safe and secure thing. Because sometime if something fails and little pathogen escape, then system is not actually, you cannot say that it is foolproof. It is always better to think in terms of some additional things which are not very costly, which will actually make it a surefire thing. So these are some of the changes that we have to actually do in the consultancy area and also engineering area and also technological innovation. So if we do that, I think we need not actually look at what benefit we had during those months. Definitely that is not going to stay. That thing I'm very confident.
Okay, thank you, sir. And here's a comment from N. Ravindranath. Sweden's model is very good to make a village self-sufficient in all areas. So, shall I read out the next question, sir?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. The question is from Francis Joseph. What is the impact of K-Rail on future of Kerala in economic, environment, and social aspect?
What is the impact of
K-Rail?
Oh, K-Rail. No, I think I have not studied the project document or the technology. One thing I can say, higher speed in the travel, our travel speed is actually currently disastrously low. It has to be raised if a country is to economically and otherwise progress. Why I am telling is, in 2000 when I went to China for working, I was actually in a state capital called Zhejiang province capital. I was in Hangzhou, and Shanghai is the next territory, and Shanghai is an internationally famous city. The distance is 200 kilometers.